So my name is Emre Toker. I'm the director of the Skandler Center for Entrepreneurship on the Danforth campus, and I appreciate you taking time away from your lunch to come and join this workshop. So we have a slide here that has a Y on it and some bubbles. The Y corresponds to the why are we here, and the bubbles I'm going to get to in a few minutes with you. So the reason why we're here happens to be this particular number. And I know that some of you have listened to my presentations before, and to this audience I can say this and hopefully it'll make sense. As we know, averaging increases the signal-to-noise ratio, so the more times you hear me say this, hopefully the more above the noise it's going to get. So 6/1,000 is the reason why we're here. The 1,000 represents the number of solicitations organized angel investor groups gets in the country. And the 6 represents the number of sustainable, scalable, successful enterprises that are generated as a result of that activity. So 6/1,000 is the hit rate, typically, for startups. And that's part of the reality check that we want to do. And this sounds like a fairly scary number, given this number, and if we believe this number to be true, which I can back up with some data that I didn't want to bore you with here, we have several options. One option is we can give up on entrepreneurship because it's only 6/1,000 and I don't have time for this. How can I deal with these types of probabilities? My life is spent better elsewhere. That's one option. The second option that I prefer personally is many people at WashU are already in the 6/1,000 as far as competency is concerned and as far as raw intellectual power is concerned. So I'd say to myself, hey, do I belong in the 6/1,000 in this field also, like I do in so many other fields? So taking it on as a challenge is one option to deal with this problem. At the national level, or even at the capital level, what is typically done is let's increase the denominator. Instead of having 1,000 people get into entrepreneurship, let's have 10,000, 100,000 people get into entrepreneurship, and thereby we'll increase the 6 into 60 and 600. And that may be fine. One might argue that that's how bubbles are formed, that one might argue that that's a very inefficient way of doing things. But it is a reality, the portfolio management tool or theory, which is I'm going to invest in 100 companies and there's bound to be a Facebook in there that's going to deliver so much returns that it will compensate me for all the mistakes that I did in the ones that I shouldn't have invested in. Our job here at this university, as I see it, is to scale the numerator. How can we make that 6 into 7, into 8, into 10, into 20? And the question is it possible to do so? So people have heard me talk a lot about horses and jockeys. So the horse is the idea that you have, and the jockey is you, the entrepreneur. It's very uncommon that we get a great jockey and a great horse come together and present themselves together. Especially at a university, what we typically get is a great jockey on a mule, which we really don't care about because we're in the business of training the jockey. Why are we training the jockey, even if he's on top of a mule to start with, is the following. If we can train the jockey well enough, and if we can give him the tools that he needs, then 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, when that jockey comes across the right horse to ride, a thoroughbred, he'll be able to jump on that horse and ride it out. So that's our theory. fine if we get a great horse and a great jockey together, but all we're after are the jockeys, and our job is to train the jockeys. Even if you don't start a company, I would argue that becoming a great jockey in this world is a great tool to take with you anywhere, to a corporation, to life in general. The one thing that I love about entrepreneurship is it's about discovering really how good you are as a multidimensional person. You can be a fantastic biologist, but you will know only so much about yourself as a fantastic biologist. But if you're an entrepreneur, you'll be tested in so many ways. I'll turn this off, I think there's an echo. In so many ways, in so many dimensions, that you'll find out how good you really are. Not just from an analytical intelligence point of view, but creative intelligence, social intelligence, practical intelligence, etc. So being trained as a jockey, to me, is a fantastic idea. So the end result of this is that I too, my students know, will say no to most of the horses. And I will say yes to only a few of the horses, even though I'm in the business of training jockeys. The other similarity we have is taste in ties, other than saying no to most things with Warren Buffett. So this presents us with the following dilemma as educators of entrepreneurship. So how do we present reality, the harsh reality of 6 over 1,000 hit rate, and yet not discourage the jockeys? And that's a problem that we have, that we deal with almost on a day-to-day basis. So let's start off with a reality check, but keeping in mind the following. I would hate it if any of you who are interested in entrepreneurship to choose the give up on entrepreneurship route because it's 6 over 1,000 probability. I would hope that all of you will say, I know for a fact I belong in the 6 over 1,000, and if given a chance I can execute on it. And our job is to make it as easy as possible for you to go through that test for yourselves within the insulated, protected bubble of Washington University initially. So the reality check goes as follows. So those of you who know Mike Tyson and have watched him, who's watched Mike Tyson? You know, in the first 20 seconds, the guy has a huge, long strategy. I'll do this, and I'll do that, and I'll do this. And then he faces Mr. Mike Tyson and down on the floor within 2 seconds. So our job, again, is this is you coming out with your business plan out into the real world, and Mike Tyson is waiting for you outside, and the first thing you get is a big punch in the face. So our job is not to pick winners, but to pick at holes until there are no holes left. In other words, we ask you all the questions that you can be faced with when you leave the bubble and present a plan to some investors, let's say. So there should be no question that they can ask you that we haven't already asked you, basically to avoid the Mike Tyson situation. So it's probably not appropriate to talk about, people getting punched in the face in an academic environment. So the corollary of this in an academic environment is stated by Mr. Steve Blank, who says no business plan survives first contact with the customer, and we know this from the real world point of view, and our job is to prepare you so that you don't face these situations. And these series of workshops are designed to start from zero. Assume that you know nothing whatsoever about business. Hopefully you know a little bit about Excel, and you have a little bit of a poet in you. Those are the only requirements to do something good in this world. Okay, so I'm going to depress everybody a little bit further with a few more slides, but then we'll go on to the upside of things. So this person, credible probably because he's from the Harvard Business School, did a study, and he says the venture capital secret is 3 out of 4 startups fail. And you say to me, hey, Henry, you said 6 over 1,000, 3 out of 4 isn't so bad, failure rate. So this is after venture capital, the masters of the universe, have looked at your concept, have did their due diligence, analyzed you, said you're worth taking a bet on, and they're worse on a flip of a coin. 75% of the time, wrong. Only 25% of the time, right. Then why do we have a VC industry? We have a VC industry because the 25% that win, actually it's 80-20 rule like always, the 20 winners make enough money to compensate all the other 80% of the, in hindsight, mistaken investments that are made. So it gets a little bit worse if we define failure of a startup as failing to reach ROI, stands for return on investment. Mr. Investor, if you invest $10,000 in me, I'm going to give you back $1 million in 5 years because I'm going to build a successful company. Well, that promise is wrong historically 95% of the time. These are historical data points that I wanted to share with you. I think this is the last crying baby slide, so just hang in there a few more minutes. So yet another study from the National Bureau of Economic Research. The x-axis is exit valuation, meaning a company got sold or had an initial public offering, and this is the fraction of those exits. So 73% of the time, the exit value of a startup is $0. That's a polite way of saying 73% of them went belly up. So the remaining is, 4%, $0 to $3 million exit, 4%, $3 to $6 million exit, and then, minuscule $200 to $500 million exit, etc., etc. So again, to repeat myself, I'm not saying these to depress you. I'm saying these because entrepreneurship is probably the most difficult game to play. And if you go out there with some hand-waving and fluff and feel-good type stuff, you're not going to be successful, so don't clog the system. This is a serious business, and we want to introduce the seriousness of what successful entrepreneurs do to ensure or to increase or to maximize their chances of success. It is not an easy game to play by any means at all. Now, we watch all these things like a hawk. By we, I mean the people who invest money in startups. So, for example, a person comes to me and says, and for this audience, hopefully this will be clear, so I have a oncological humanized MAB. Great, and it works, perfectly in mice and so on and so forth. Historical probability of getting that product from that stage to market is 24%. So 75% chance from where we stand today is the chance of failure. And for anything that comes to us, we have some statistical, historical measure of the likelihood of failure. And again, when I say we watch this stuff like a hawk, we really do watch it like a hawk. These are the probabilities of transitioning from one phase of a clinical trial to the next phase of a clinical trial as a function of disease area. We'll share all these slides with you by email, so you don't have to worry. If you want to, you can take it, but nobody wants to see me in the picture. Respiratory disease, 20% historical transition from phase 2 to phase 3, etc., etc. You can read it for yourself, right? So we're assigning probability of failure to everything that is being done. So once again, why am I here? No sense in trying. I skipped lunch for this. Terrible. It's not. Happy babies. Beautiful happy baby pictures. So now I have to talk a little bit about my personal experience, not for, patting myself in the back of the job and way beyond that. But I started 3 startups, all medical device companies. And actually, myself and my wife, Marianne over there, who's doing some other work, I'm sure I'm not listening to me, because she's listened to this stuff for 20 million times before. So I bootstrapped 3 medical device companies. 2 of them were acquired by a public company. 1 of them was acquired by a private equity firm. They were sequential. It took 7 years from start to sale of the company. Started the other one, start, sale, 7 years. And I did this in a bootstrap fashion. The reason why I say, I'm not saying this to pat myself in the back. By nature, my brain is wired such that, I like to analyze things. So what happened? Why did I allegedly, these are obviously correlated, right? Once you make one, it allegedly gets a little bit easier to do the second one and so on. So 1 in 5 million, really? 90% of WashU students are far smarter than me. So it wasn't, the intelligence that did it. So what was it that did it in hindsight? So what worked at my startups, I have no doubt in my mind, 0, was that I either was able to bring together the right side and the left side of the skill sets that are necessary to win, or I was able to persuade other people to join me where I was lacking. This is what I mean. We're at a university where we're surrounded by people who are extremely book smart, no question about it. But if you don't have street smarts, you're going to fail at entrepreneurship, I can guarantee you. Some of you here may play chess very well. You can think 6 moves ahead, 7 moves ahead, whatever is a good indicator in chess. So that's strategizing, which you have to do if you start a company. But if you can't win with a weak hand, if you don't know how to win with a weak hand, you're going to fail at entrepreneurship. If you can't read the opponent's eye and see when he's bluffing, you're not going to win at entrepreneurship. If you can't yourself bluff and not let the opponent know you're bluffing, you're not going to win at entrepreneurship. So my tiny little companies were competing with General Electric Medical Systems. We had so much respect for General Electric Medical Systems that we used to call it the General. And we were fighting the General. And the General had, thousands of engineers. And we were, at our biggest, we're an 18-employee company. And we would, in our selected battlefield, excuse my language, we would kick GEs behind every day. We would move so much faster than GE that they wouldn't know what was going on. And so this ability to play poker, critical factor. And then, especially for the students in the audience, I'm 100% confident that the winners over the next 20, 30 years is going to be those people who can speak and understand the language and culture of science as well as the language and culture of business. If you're a pure scientist, we see dozens of you, I don't care. If you're an MBA, we see 20 dozens of you, and I don't care. But if I get a scientist who can sit in the boardroom and speak our language and understand our language and understand our culture, I am in awe and I'm after you. I want you. So this idea of combining, and I'm not saying become a deep expert, just understanding both of those is another recipe for beating the odds. Now, because of this audience, which I assume has been able to wrap their heads around, most of you have wrapped your head around quantum physics, business, startups, is absolutely trivial and common sense. There can be nothing easier to learn than business, in my opinion. It's just trivial. It's just compared to physics, quantum physics, it's nothing. So there's no need whatsoever to be intimidated, if we can say that, by, well, I don't know anything about business. It's not that hard. You can learn business in a few seconds. So I never took any business class in my life. I'm a physicist and I'm an electrical engineer by training, and yet I was able to build and sell 3 companies. So how did that happen? I don't have an MBA. I don't care for an MBA. I run circles around MBAs, no doubt about it. Once again, my objective here through this workshop series is for those of you who are on this side of the fence to see how simple it is at the conceptual level to handle particularly the analytical side of things. So once again, we're playing an incredibly tough game. We first have to be very intelligent, arm's length, cold, calculating, numbers-based. We got to have all of these. But if we have all of these and we don't have those, we're not going to succeed at the startup game, no question. We can have all the passion in the world and, I'm so enthusiastic about my company, but I don't want to deal with numbers. Numbers are kind of boring and complicated. Well, okay, you're saying essentially I'm going to fail. So you have to be able to combine emotion and reason. And when you have a company, is only when I think you can really internalize what this means. What I'm trying to say is, again, I don't want to give my own personal experiences, but they may be relevant. So I remember days when I was in bed next to my wife, and I could feel my stomach bleeding because I had to make a decision that would have an impact on 20 employees, right? Their livelihoods and their families and so on and so forth. If you don't have this side under control, no amount of numerical analysis is going to help you, and vice versa. So these may just seem like words on a piece of paper, but I see these every day. So for example, combining self-confidence and humility. So supreme self-confidence coupled with humility. Very few people have this ability, and that's one of the requirements for winning at the entrepreneurship game. Knowing what you do not know. We deal with scientists all the time. So because I know molecular biology, I know everything, including business. Well, sir, actually, no, you don't. So knowing what you do not know is also critically important for everybody. Again, talking to the students, most of our students come here having gotten A+ throughout. There's nothing called failure as far as they're concerned in their lifetime. Entrepreneurship is about getting slapped, falling, getting up, dusting yourself off, moving again, one more slap, fall again, get up. So students are not used to this. So the courage to fail is what stops many potential entrepreneurs. One student came to me and he was describing me his idea and so on. And I said to him, so what's preventing you from pulling the trigger on this? And he thought and thought and thought, and without having seen these slides, he said, I'm afraid to fail. So he basically told me, until I can cross this bridge, no matter how many brain cells I have, it's not going to happen. Human psychology, understanding human behavior, completely, 100% essential. If you cannot look at a client's in the face and see whether that person is getting bored or not by what you're saying, he's already completely turned off and you're unable to detect it and you're trying to still sell the guy, you're not going to succeed as an entrepreneur. And ethics and values and passion, I have lots of stories about that. It's very easy to say, oh, we know what ethics is. We can even teach it in a course. No, sir, until you come across a situation like the following, for example. We had a medical device, and it was FDA-regulated medical device. We found a flaw in our production mechanism. We sat with all the geek engineers, including myself, and determined very objectively, very scientifically, there is no risk to patients in this. So now the choice was, do we inform the FDA, in which case the FDA can shut our factory down and I have to lay off 20 people and be responsible for their children and their families and so on and so forth, or do I send my engineers one at a time to each installation sequentially and quickly fix what the issue was? Now, that's an ethical problem. Which one do you do? Do you lay off 20 people, or do you do something that is not 100% white as far as the FDA is concerned? So those are the type of issues. If you're not as a person not equipped to handle such decisions, then maybe a 9-to-5 job where you get a paycheck is the better route to go, and let other people make those types of decisions for you. Yeah.
So Emery, what did you do?
In case there's any people with parents in the FDA or any relationship to the FDA, I will decline to say, and I think the statute of limitations may also apply.
Okay.
Yeah. But we did not hurt anybody at all. Okay. So, so the workshop series pretends to be, and I'll explain what I mean by pretend to be, a scientific approach to entrepreneurship. If you see me, hear me, giving you any fluff, any type of hand waving, you should push straight back at me, because that's not the objective of this series. However, even though this is the science of entrepreneurship, therefore we're going to focus on this area, I know personally, and my wife knows, I used to tell her this, 95% of what I do is psychiatry. Well, maybe psychology. Psychiatry implies crazy people, right? So they weren't totally crazy. 95% of what I did was psychology, and 5% was everything else, technical and everything else. So I had to deal with employees, I had to deal with vendors, I had to deal with all kinds of stakeholders, regulatory agency, lawyers, etc., etc. 95% psychology. So, Enra, why are you teaching the 5%? Why don't you teach us the 95%? Well, because I don't know if that stuff is teachable. If you didn't learn it from your mother, probably too late. So I could give it a shot, but I'm much more comfortable explaining to you this side, and you have to decide for yourself whether you as a person can deal with the emotional side. Okay, so this course, this series of workshops is going to focus on the reason side. Now, some odds and ends. Universities are in a precarious situation. Does entrepreneurship deserve to be called a legitimate academic discipline? Or is entrepreneurship something that we need to get some young people who are not from the guild, who may not have PhDs, but who have done it before, come and teach us this stuff? So people are now beginning to offer PhD in entrepreneurship. I have no idea what PhD in entrepreneurship means, and will a PhD in entrepreneurship have a better likelihood of starting a great enterprise? I kind of doubt it myself. But I'm open to be proven wrong. But my job is to elevate the teaching of entrepreneurship to as close a level as possible to a legitimate academic discipline. And I don't have a PhD, I'm not an academic, I'm from the industry, but I have tremendous respect for the academic institution, and I know how it works. I have tremendous respect for science, and so I would like to bring all those components to this series of workshops. A few odds and ends, really quickly. So this was the why component of the presentation, and I'll get into the how component in a second, which will be much more interesting, hopefully. So the odds and ends. The first one, the bigger why. So why are we doing all this? Well, one possible reason is because Stanford did it. And the way Stanford did it is absolutely fantastic. So in 1980, there wasn't anything around Stanford of the type that we're seeing now, so at most they have, 35 years over us, but the world is balancing out. Anyways, the numbers speak for themselves. Look at this, if you think this is the definition of success, then look at the numbers. 18,000 firms created by Stanford alumni, generating $1.27 trillion in revenue. That's higher than many countries, employing 3 million people. 39% of these people are within 60 miles of Stanford. And then for those who say, this is all about money, 30,000 nonprofit organizations generated by Stanford University. So it's not just the university, it's the entire ecosystem that's generating this. But as I say, in the 80s, there wasn't an ecosystem. They were able to pull this off. So this may be one reason why we're doing it. Okay, so parental guidance suggested for the next slide, because it's kind of not such a comfortable slide. And it goes back to the idea of why are we doing this? Is it to create companies, create wealth, etc.? And then is there a slippery slope possibility? So this gentleman is the CEO of Bayer. First of all, I'd like you to notice the smirk on his face, coupled with what he's saying. So, first of all, it's amazing that this person was able to get to the CEO position of Bayer, even if he believes this, that he would be stupid enough to say such a thing and still be the CEO of Bayer Corporation. So when I show this to students, I indicate the smirk and I say, are you sure that you want this face in your life? God forbid, do you want this face to be your face? No offense to the poor guy, but so I think the next generation who we're dealing with, our students, are supposed to solve or attempt to solve questions of this type. There may be, I'm sure there are people in the audience who may say, he's right. He's responsible to his shareholders and he's going to sell anything that he can at the highest price possible because he's not tasked with saving the world, he's tasked with making money for their shareholders. So these are very, very difficult questions that if you start a company and then if it becomes successful, you yourself are going to face. So keep it in the back of your mind. Is the big why to crank out people of this type who generate wealth and then, give it back in some philanthropic way, perhaps to alleviate their feelings of guilt and so on and so forth. So big questions underlying this routine, process-based things that we'll be talking about at this workshop. So we said we can't teach you emotion. We can teach you, obviously we can't teach you reason either, but we can teach you the way successful entrepreneurs have approached the quantitative analytical methodology to create a successful company. That's what the course is going to focus on. And the one thing that we're not going to focus on, that we're going to outsource to a student organization called Bio Entrepreneurship Corps. Michelle Fates over there is the president of Bio Entrepreneurship Corps. I don't want to take time with this course telling you about things that, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, they're not fundamental in the sense that this is information available. How do you navigate the FDA? How do you file a patent application? Should I form an LLC, C Corp, S Corp? How does reimbursement work? How do we license the technology out of the university, etc., etc.? I'm not going to delve into those because those are knowable. They don't require a very special intersection of experiences to cover. So in parallel, Bio Entrepreneurship Corps is going to offer what I'm calling the nuts and bolts of this process during this workshop series. So this ends the why component, the very first workshop, and I said 1A, and my wife was asking, what's this 1A, workshop 1A? So 1A is just the why are we doing this question. And now I'll move on to the how question. So fine, how are you going to teach us this stuff then? Explain yourself to us. And my principle is the following, what Einstein said. Keep things as simple as possible, but not simpler. I mentioned to you before, entrepreneurship is a tough game. So if you don't want to commit the time to learn it, then we can do a feel-good operation and everybody leaves happy. We'll keep it as simple as possible, but not simpler. So as I'm pulling up the part 1B, the how, please shoot any questions at me that you may have. Anybody, for example, I really solicit strongly negative feedback and pushback because positive feedback does me absolutely no good. It's one of those, great job, whatever George Bush said to the to the guy in New Orleans after the floods. What was his name?
Ronnie.
Yeah, great job, Ronnie. Yeah, let's continue on. So, pushback, feedback, things that you completely disagree with. My skin is this thick after this many years, so you can't hurt me. Please give me some thoughts on where the workshop will head, given what I just said. None? Fine by me. We'll move on. Okay, so now we're going to do the how. No worries. Okay, so, I don't know how fast I would go, so, okay, we're going to teach you the analytical side of things, fine, and how are we going to do this? And the question that you may have in the back of your minds is, okay, what will I know by the end of this workshop series? So I'm going to jump all the way to the end point, and I'm going to ask you to bear with me, because things will look perhaps unnecessarily complicated, but they're not. So I'm asking you to trust me for just a few minutes as to where I'm claiming we will be by the end of this workshop series. So by the end of this workshop series, number one, we will speak the same terminology. Because if I don't understand you, and if you don't understand me when I use certain terminology associated with startups, then, it's extremely painful, at least from my point of view, because I ask the same questions over and over again, and I have to explain the same definitions over and over again. It's like learning French. I have to learn French, much easier than French, by the way, just like 50 terms. We have to be able to speak the same language. So by the end of the workshop series, you will have the language at hand so that you will be able to talk to anybody from the startup world, from the investment world, in a credible manner. And you will have self-confidence about talking the language. The second part is critically important. This part is, I think, the only place where I use some red letters. It's that important. Red letter worthy. So what is entrepreneurship? So I define myself actually really as a scientist, and I probably love science more than I like entrepreneurship, but there is a corollary. So what is entrepreneurship at the bottom line? None of us are prophets. None of us know the future. Yet we're trying to predict what's going to happen in the future as entrepreneurs. If we predict well, then we win. If we don't predict well, then we lose. Right? So, what will I know by the end of this workshop? You will be able to paint a defensible is a key word here, picture of the future, a defensible picture of the future, based on information available today with an asterisk, because today is a moving entity. Your level of information is going to improve over time, which will make you change the picture of the future that you're presenting. So we will start off with a set of assumptions, a justification of those assumptions, that's the defensibility argument, and the picture that those assumptions paint. These assumptions start becoming reality as you dive into this thing and when you launch your company. Assumptions are replaced by reality, and subsequent assumptions are now guided by what reality has shown. Year number 0, we may have all assumptions. How do we justify these assumptions? By using benchmarks. There is other companies that use the same so-called business model. So we have similar companies like yours that we have seen, and if your assumptions are way off, are outliers, we have the ability to catch those and say, this is not what happened. You're 6 sigma away from the mean. Explain yourself to me. And then those assumptions become replaced by reality over time that change subsequent assumptions. So there's a concrete logic associated with this. Okay, now I'll try to make this as engaging and enjoyable for you as possible, but no more enjoyable than when you were learning French. And you memorize French words. Except it'll be a little bit more exciting because I'll pepper it with lots of examples and so on and so forth as we hit each one of these terms. So let's see if we can do this. So the very first step, by the way, no need to panic yet, because as I said, I'm only talking about where will we be at the end of this entire workshop series and not today. Okay. So when somebody comes to me, I'll ask them certain questions. I'll say, what is your total available market? What's your served market? What's your sales cycle? What's your churn rate? What is the cost of customer acquisition? What is your annual revenue per employee? Blah, 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 blah. And the person will say, I don't know what you mean even. Never heard of it before, this particular term. This is completely by coincidence, 100 terms, including what is an employee stock option, what's an internal rate of return, what's the return on interest, and so on and so forth. If we don't understand what these terms mean, dead on arrival. It's just not going to happen. To make it easy for you, here are links, curated links, to the best of the best from the web, either videos or articles written by credible people and short ones, 10-minute video, you watch it and you'll understand what total available market means. So again, I'm trying to do as little work as possible, right? So somebody comes to me and says, I have an idea. Okay, great. I'm going to be asking you some questions associated with this terminology. Why don't you go and learn the terminology? I even gave you curated sources, and then come back to me. The good jockeys will do it. The bad jockeys will self-select out and not come back to me because they don't have time to do all this stuff, therefore they don't deserve to be entrepreneurs. Within a university, it's a little bit different, so I teach a course where I'll go, each one and give lots of examples and so on. But Google already knows everything that I'm telling you. I'm completely useless because I'm just repeating what Google already knows. It's just that the packaging and the examples to kind of engage you and be able to answer your questions on the fly because I faced it before. Okay, step one is going to be going through the terminology in a fashion that is as engaging and useful as possible. By giving you lots and lots of examples, and we're talking about at most 100 terms. They're not that complicated. They're all common sense. Pick a term from quantum physics, right? Action at a distance, blah blah, or much simpler than that stuff. Totally straightforward things. Second one, now we're going to increase the level of complexity a little bit. We're going to develop a defensible picture of the future based on information we currently have. I am extremely dissatisfied with the level of activity that goes on as entrepreneurship teaching, which to me is a lot of hand-waving, a lot of fluff, represented by this cartoon. We have invested our hearts and souls in this company. We're only asking you to invest $10 million. No, sir. Thank you. I'm glad you invested your heart and soul, but I need more than that before I invest $10 million in you, and that's the part that we're going to try to cover. Now, what's the fundamental, the key to all this stuff? It's the following. And the easiest way for me to describe this to you is through an example. So you come to me and you say, I have a great idea. It's a minimally invasive medical device idea. And for those of you who know, it's a Class 2 device as defined by the FDA, 510K, blah, blah. And I'm projecting that I'm going to have to spend $150,000 to get this device through the FDA, and it's going to take me 18 months. I go back to my personal database in my brain, and I've seen, let's say, 65 companies that took a minimally invasive medical device through the FDA, and I have a histogram in my mind of how long did each one take and how much money did each one have to spend. So the median, let's say, was $500,000 and 24 months. And you're saying, I'm going to do $300,000 in 6 months. So I say, you're 2 sigma off from the mean, and you explain to me what is special about your case that you'll be able to achieve this. So it's a matter of justifying assumptions through either data that is coming from the venture itself, or, if that is not available, from other companies that have been in the area that you're attempting to go into. So this is another example. So for e-commerce companies, for instance, so I've been an angel investor now for 15 years, and I see about 40 applications per month. So I've seen about 5,000 applications, and as you can tell by now, I hope, I like to dig into things. So I dug into 5,000 applications, and so I have a little database and I have little silos. So which one is this coming in? You know, the 5,001st application? It's an e-commerce consumer subscription model. Boom, into that silo it goes. For that silo, my internal database says there is a cost of user acquisition. The amount of money that I have to spend to bring somebody into my website and then have them buy something. There's a cost associated with it. And I have the statistical data for this category of how much money other companies have spent. And so when you tell me my cost of customer acquisition is going to be $8, I can say Groupon was $7 in year number 1, and it jumped up to $54 in year number 5 as they scaled up as a function of the number of users that they had. Inconsistent with that data. That's just one data point. Also inconsistent with the aggregated data. Explain yourself to me. How are you going to do this? So this is the type of mentor and tormentor model that we deploy. That tormenting is designed to weed out the ones who are wannapreneurs as opposed to entrepreneurs. And it works. So let me show you now the more complex version. As we said, step 1 was simply to know the terminology. If you say to me, I don't even know what you're talking about, we have no place to go. Step number 2. Okay, sir, I went and I now understand all the terms that you're asking me for. I know what they mean. And you asked me for some numbers to fill in. Because as I said, our job is now to project the future. So I'm asking you for your key financial assumptions. For example, are you going to have multiple revenue streams? If so, how many customers? What is the cost? What is the sales cycle? What's the cost of customer acquisition? What's the revenue per unit? Material cost per unit, etc., etc., etc. All of these numbers I want you to fill in as best as you can. These 100 terms, right? Not only that, but I'm also going to ask you to provide me with what? With evidence for validity of these assumptions based on benchmark companies or data or references, etc. Step number 2. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have sources for this for digital products?
We have sources for it for everything.
And you're going to share that with us?
Oh, the database would be an unmanageably large database. So I'll get to your question in 2 seconds, okay? Actually, there are 2 answers to your question. One of them is outside of this particular workshop series, but the proposal that I'm making to WashU is the following. I know it has nothing to do with this workshop, but bear with me here for a second. WashU, it's impossible for WashU to out-Stanford or out-MIT, in my lifetime at least, regarding the number of new ventures that we cranked out and so on and so forth, those type of metrics. So WashU has to pick an area that it can claim for itself and it can own completely, and we are the ones that know this area. What could that area be in the world of entrepreneurship, in this very crowded environment of every university as an entrepreneurship sector? Everybody is making noise about the business model canvas and so on and so forth, and connecting people, etc., etc. But how do you dominate an area and undisputed leader in that area? So the proposal that I'm making to WashU is the following. Why not attempt to become the owner and the manager of a database, national database of startup performance metrics, so that when we say minimally invasive medical device, all the data associated with what other companies faced in that area is in this database. There's challenges. How do you get this data? Who's going to give you this data? The founder is too busy to give data to WashU. However, the angel investor, who has either invested or is thinking about investing like $500,000, may make it mandatory to the company that he's thinking of investing in. Give me that data. He gives it to WashU. WashU provides back to that investor anonymized and aggregated results from the database of all similar companies, what they experience, so that the investor can make a better judgment on whether to invest or not. Barring that, this is fragmented information that's available in my head, in VC groups' heads. So some venture capital firms will say, we only invest in diagnostic and not therapeutics. Why? Because they have their database on diagnostics and not therapeutics. They refer back to their database, and they do this every day. Those numbers that I showed you about transition from phase 2 clinical to phase 3, what's the percentage probability of passing and so on. This is all data that resides within VC that they will not share with you because that's how they make money. The reason why WashU is critical is because WashU has credibility, objectivity, capability, the science and the brain power and everything else to claim ownership of such a database. So if I can persuade people above my pay grade to think about this, maybe we'll do that. Barring that, we're left to individuals, which I'm going to get to in a second. So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in the business of leveraging. Everything that I do, I say to myself, can I get something else out of this beyond what's obvious? So one reason why I ask this question to anybody who comes to me asking for money is because I want the information to go back into my personal database. Because these are websites, these are articles that I don't have time to go through, so I can use these now in terms of adding to my database, my own personal database of information, as long as it's credible information. Okay, so stepping back a second, what did I do? The person came to me and said, I have an idea, I want money from you. I said to them, excellent, let me ask you 3 questions, and if to all 3 you say, I don't even know what you're talking about, I never heard that term before, go back and learn the terminology and then come back to me again. If it's a student at a university, then I say, okay, you need to take this course or come to this workshop or work with me so that you learn this terminology, educator versus investor. The person comes back and says, I understand all the terminology now. Now I say, okay, give me your key financial assumptions, and then come back. So he says, I can't find this information. I say, I understand, just do your best and come back to me whenever you have it, even if it's half-baked, don't worry, come back, we'll work on it together. Okay, this is where the second step comes into play. So in this Excel, what I have is what I'm calling raw inputs. Down here, raw inputs. These are the financial assumptions that the founder has made and has come back to me with. Now this is what happens. One or a group of, let's call them, for lack of a better word, experts in the field, meaning those who have had some experience in that particular domain, let's say a diagnostic or a class 2 medical device or e-commerce subscription consumer or software as a service, blah, blah, comes in and he says, okay, these assumptions, this one that you made is not consistent with my experience in the area. I think that number should be higher. You cannot sell, for example, the person says, I have an educational tool that I'm going to sell to universities. I know that the sales cycle to sell to a university is at least 24 months. So if you put 3 months for your sales cycle, I'm going to challenge you on it. We can have a debate about it as to why it should be 24 months and not 3 months. If you're going to try to sell to Fortune 500 companies your product, the cost of customer acquisition, the amount of money you have to spend to persuade a large company to buy your product is not $100. It's more like $6,000 or $10,000 because you have to go to a trade show, pay for the trade show, take them out to dinner, give them a demo. These are all cost of customer acquisition. So the third step, terminology. Fill in your assumptions. Have your assumptions gone over by a domain expert. The domain expert is not a mentor. The domain expert is someone who has the data. And that, hopefully at some point in time in the future, that won't even have to be a person. This database will say, here are the metrics from the last 85 companies, startups that entered this field. And here are the numbers that they faced. Here's the mean, here's the standard deviation, etc., etc. So that part of it comes in. And now painting the picture of the future. So the back end of this Excel now, which I'm not showing you, nor will you have access to the back end of this Excel, calculates from basic assumptions, detailed entire picture of the future. How much money is this company going to earn? Revenue. How much is the profit going to be? How much investment is it going to need in year number 1, in year number 2, in year number 3? How much will it be valued in 5 years if there's an acquisition event? It will tell us a picture of the future. It will also include things that you may have seen on Shark Tank, like, based on the assumptions that you have given me, and after their adjustment by what I know that I'm more than willing to debate with you. So we're not like negotiating at a bazaar, Turkish bazaar, for the price of tomatoes like they do in Shark Tank. Your valuation based on these assumptions is $315,000, $300,000 or $350,000. I mean, these 08s and so on are just artifacts of Excel, obviously. And I'll invest, and your assumptions say you need a seed investment of $250,000. So I will invest $250,000 for 47% of your company. Oh no, that sounds too much. Okay, then show me which assumptions you disagree with that will bring us to the level that you want me to be at. So it's a platform for reasoned discussion between a founder and an investor, which requires some hard work, understanding the terminology, benchmarking the key financial assumptions, and then coming up with the consequences of those financial assumptions. The beauty of this Excel is each time we change a single cell in the assumptions, the entire thing will recalculate itself. The entire picture of the future will be repainted each time we change a single cell in the Excel. So we caution entrepreneurs that you shouldn't fall in love with the baby, and then we do it ourselves. I personally am in love with this baby. Because it's my baby, number one. And more importantly, hopefully, I try to deploy this, emotion and reason thing and have an arm's length relationship with the baby as much as possible. And so we use this in making our investment decisions, real money, real investment decisions, and we use it for portfolio monitoring. Meaning, what we tell our portfolio companies is the following. Here are some assumptions that they gave us, 5-year assumptions. And this may not be the best example because this is a diagnostic and there's no revenue for the first 2 years, etc. But these are our assumptions for year 1, assumptions for year 2, etc. Right? Once we pull the trigger and invest in a company, we say, at the end of the first year, come back to us, replacing first year's assumptions by reality. Eventually, reality will assert itself. Now replace these with reality and change these on the basis of what reality has shown you in the first year. So that we can monitor and track and make a decision about, do we want to double down on this investment. So we're typically use, that poker and chess analogy that I use. We use the poker analogy constantly. For example, we were talking to someone about the company and he was saying, I'll put in money to see the next card. Right? What he's saying is that the next card here means I'm willing to invest to see if the first year's assumptions will come true, giving myself the ability to invest further if the assumptions come true. Just enough money to see the next card. So this is where we're going to end up. Now, as I pull the next one up, this goes from 12 to 1:30, I believe, I want to give you an example of how I would treat just one term so that you can gauge for yourself how complicated is this thing going to be when he starts talking about, each of these terms one by one. So the first term is total available market. I'm going to pull that one up, part 1C of the workshop. And once again, I will solicit pushback, negative feedback. Okay, I'll even take positive feedback then. Comments, questions, pushback, feedback? None, okay.
So, ask one question.
Yes, sir.
Would you encourage us, or would you encourage entrepreneurs to develop a simplified version of the sort of spreadsheet that you've developed?
My answer is going to be, again, being very careful about not calling the baby ugly syndrome. My answer is there is no need to. This Excel is comprehensive. It's been developed over many years, many nighttime and weekend and so on. Lots of blood, sweat, tears, lots of band-aids, lots of repetition. It's been, I'm not going to say perfected, but it still has room for improvement. We'll increase it to a 7-year cycle, for example, and so on. But I don't think there is any need to reinvent the wheel. But if somebody wants to reinvent the wheel, be my guest. Yeah.
We're going to discuss in this series issues as far as patents and intellectual property.
Yeah. So in 2 ways. From my point of view, the Excel is going to be the guideline that gives us. So in the Excel, there's a component that says research and development costs. Let's assume that IP costs are going to be incorporated into our R&D cost as opposed to general and administrative or sales and marketing and so on. And then when we are discussing what number should you put in there, what's the IP cost component of this, all my prior knowledge about IP, fine details. For example, typically a university will come up with like one patent, for one molecular structure, and say, hooray, we got a patent, let's go start a company. But the way that is normally done is to build a fence of patents around that intellectual property so that nobody can penetrate that fence. So that type of, if I may say it, know-how will be incorporated into the numbers that we put into one cell of the Excel. That's why the word defensible is very important. We don't just throw out a number there. The number that we throw in there includes, regulatory costs for R&D, intellectual property costs for building a patent fence, things along these lines. But eventually there are numerical entries that are defended by our know-how. But as far as the process of, what do? You first file a provisional application, and this is what a provisional application means, and you buy yourself 12 months, and you do a non-provisional application, and here's, why the patent system was created by the U.S. government, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to focus on that. By Entrepreneurship Core is going to focus on that. We're going to outsource that type of fundamental information. We'll outsource that. Same thing with the business school. We want to differentiate the Entrepreneurship Center from the business school. The business school teaches fundamentals. We provide venture-specific, on-demand, practical guidance, not, go and take Entrepreneurship 101. That doesn't happen. That's not our job. It's the business school's job. Did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Can I ask real quick? So you said you're going to outsource that information, but obviously we have an intellectual property division here at the University of, the university.
OTM?
Yes.
Yep.
Which they work with them? Or?
So they are students, and what they do is they bring guest speakers. For example, for intellectual property, the guest speaker will most likely be from the OTM. And they will come and give a presentation. On reimbursements, reimbursement specialists will come. So, it's unreasonable for us to expect students to have that level of depth of information. They're an organizational entity tasked with, gathering the right type of speakers to give presentations. The differentiation that I'm making is I would feel that it would be, first of all, know what you don't know. I know this. I don't know about intellectual property. Somebody else should teach that. And I don't want to kill the time associated with this workshop series with, the logistics of intellectual property. So this workshop will focus on how do you build and defend a startup, not what is intellectual property. One more thing. So my fear is that even this audience may say, it looks too complicated and too much time investment necessary. I want to assure you that it's not. Only in the surface it looks complicated, but what will you end up with? So I see this every day. Scientists come up with a great invention here at WashU. 3 of them very recently were approached by a VC, and the VC said, we're ready to invest $250,000 in you. It will be a convertible loan, and it will have a $1 million cap, an 8% discount, blah, blah. And the scientists are saying, what? No idea what the guy just said. Wouldn't it be better to spend a few hours to understand what this says so that back to the VC they could say, so you're putting a pre-vetted valuation of $300,000 on this, and there's a vesting schedule and so on and so forth. It's not that complicated, honestly. Very, very easy to pick up this stuff so that you can put the playing field to a level playing field. In other words, I skipped over this one, but the other thing that you will be able to do, beyond painting a defensible picture of the future, the ability to negotiate, or if not negotiate, to understand what type of proposal capital is making to you. It's a tilted playing field. I'm a scientist, I understand the science, and these guys say, well, I have the money and I also speak the language. Okay, I'm going to speak the language too, and all you'll have over me is the money that you have. Then I can go and shop for other customers who have the money also. So to reduce the disadvantage that you may be at through an investment of, 7 hours of time spread over 7 weeks. I cannot imagine not wanting to take that, but who am I to say? Okay, where was I? Okay, so this is what you will be subjected to if you continue on with the workshops. So, first entry in the Excel says something called total available market, and I'm just doing this to give you an example, a sense as to how we would deal with this thing. So first we're going to define what it is. So, total demand for your particular product or service, and not your market share. In other words, I put up a startup and it has this widget that I want to sell to people. I'm not asking you when I say what's your total available market, I'm not asking you how many of these units are you going to sell. I'm asking you how many potential customers are there out there that you could convince me would have an interest in buying your widget. Total available market. Not your market share, but the demand. And these all have to be preceded by the word defensible. Okay. So why are we so interested in your total available market? Because it's the number 2 reason why venture capital will say no to you. They will say, your market is not big enough, or your market can't get big enough to be of interest to me. By the way, everybody says, what's the number 1 reason? Well, number 1 reason is a poor team, why VC would say no to you. So, why are they so concerned about, particularly venture capital, about a big market? So there's a new venture capital group that's being formed in St. Louis called Lewis and Clark Ventures, and this is no secret. So they say the smallest check we can cut is $3 million. The smallest investment we can make is $3 million. First of all, why are they saying this? Why not make a $200,000 investment? Why $3 million? The reason is because they don't want to deal with a whole bunch of rabbits. There's only a few people within the VC firm, so they want to make big bets on a few companies. So the big bet is $3 million. As we said, they too know that the likelihood of failure is 75%. So therefore, they have an expectation that $3 million is going to turn into $300 million when the company exits. Otherwise, it's not worth taking the risk if there's a 75% chance of failure. Plus, they will get diluted along the way. They won't own that big a share of the company as new money comes in. What I'm saying is, therefore, they cannot afford to bet on anything other than huge markets. That's why the first question to you is, what's the total available market? If it's, tiny little thing, pass immediately. Doesn't matter how good it is, VC is going to pass. It could become a lifestyle company. It could become a bootstrapped company. My companies I exited at 4 million, 5 million, 8 million, thereabouts. But I didn't get any VC money, nor would any VC invest in my companies with that type of an exit plan. The market was not big enough. Okay, so why care? Total available market. So this is the name of the game. I kind of like to look at the big picture of things. If you believe in evolution, which hopefully this group does, we're all driven by evolutionary forces. And the primary evolutionary force is fear versus greed. So, VC or anybody else who's thinking of starting a company is hit with these thoughts in the back of their mind. The first one is fear. Will it fail? Will I lose my money? Will my wife yell at me because either I invested money in this company or I quit my beautiful university job and started this company and then it failed? So fear, tremendous, knot in the stomach, balanced by greed. But then what if it succeeds? I see this guy, he made, a $300 million exit. Risk versus reward. Think big, start small, niches to riches. All of these are going in your mind. And the total available market is a way of addressing the reward side, the think big side, the greed side, the riches side of the equation. Now, the masters of the universe are often wrong. VCs, hopefully there's no VCs here, at least big VCs, but they passed on Airbnb. This is from your slides. Thank you. They passed on Airbnb in the very beginning because they presumably said market can't get big enough. Who the heck is going to stay at somebody else's dirty house and ugly blankets and so on? And yet today Airbnb is valued higher than Marriott, Starwood, Wyndham hotels, and so on and so forth. So there is a certain amount of self-confidence, right? If you believe in it strongly enough, you should not be discouraged by the masters of the universe telling you that the market is not large enough. It can get large enough. And balance, the whole thing about entrepreneurship is balancing, right? I don't want to call my baby ugly. These guys are saying your baby is ugly, but it really looks beautiful to me. Your job to make the calls. This is what makes the emotional side difficult. Total available market either expressed in units and dollars, and the estimation is either top down or bottom up. So what does top down and bottom up mean? As usual, trivial common sense stuff. Top down means I go to a market report, which the Entrepreneurship Center has subscriptions to, and if you're in the medical sterilization systems market, these guys say that market is worth $4 billion, and North America accounts for $1.1 billion of that sum. Okay, DC, so that's my total available market. I'm attacking a really large market. Are you satisfied? That's the top-down approach. The bottom-up approach is when we don't have such reports. Sometimes such reports are not available. We try to kind of bootstrap it up from the bottom. This is the exact exercise that I went through myself. I was coming up with a medical device that's used in breast biopsies. And I very much recommend you read this. Enrico Fermi, he came up with something called the Fermi solution. What it is the quickest way to come up with a close enough approximation to a question. Fantastic methodology. So application of the Fermi solution. So I'm trying to estimate the number of breast imaging centers in the U.S. because I want to sell them a product. And I had no idea how many breast imaging centers, and I couldn't find the report. However, I know that in Arizona there's 130 breast imaging centers. I do a ratio population between Arizona and the U.S. and extrapolate the 130 into 6,300. Close enough. I'm assuming, what's the assumption I'm making, that the U.S. is a uniform country. There's no reason for there to be a higher number of breast imaging centers in Arizona than in any other part of the country. And Fermi Solution says 6,300, move ahead. I could have done even Tucson, Arizona, and do a ratio of Tucson, Arizona to the country, and would have come up with a close enough approximation. So that's the bottom-up approach to estimating what the total market might be. The best market size. So here's a good example. Bone graft substitute market, whatever that means, we don't care. Bone graft substitute market for spinal fusions. Bone graft substitute market for non-union spinal fusions. So the idea is to shrink the market because it's already $1.6 billion. This number is so large that it doesn't mean anything to us as investors. We want you to tell us what is the best market solution fit market and what's the size of that market. So to give you another example, some students of mine came up with a customized ebook for children with autism. So number of families with children with autism. Number of families with children with autism in the age range 5 to 10. Number of families with children with autism in the age range 5 to 10 making over $200,000 per year. Squeeze, 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 squeeze until we get to the market that is the best fit to us, is what the standard methodology is for calculating the total available market. Again, I use the same methodology here. This may be of interest to everybody actually in this audience. Hopefully this won't disappear on me again. Maybe it's on automatic still. Let's do this just to be safe. So when I started my company, this was the third company, I attacked this area, meaning devices to be used during breast conserving surgery. And I knew that 200,000 women per year who get diagnosed with breast cancer would be in need of an equipment of this type. So I said to myself, I'm going to enter this market. It's below the radar of General Electric and so on. And once I dominate this tiny little market, then I'm going to move up to this market and start dominating the equipment market for this field. And as soon as I start knocking on this door, I'm going to be acquired. And that's exactly what happened. We went and dominated this area. We started gaining market share in this area. And when the big boys noticed us, we were picked up. So this is the type of calculation that we go through in terms of deciding what the total available market is and where are we going to start penetrating this market, that niches to riches argument. So sometimes people get it wrong. Some people in the audience may recognize this card. The Mustang, the old Mustang. So when the Ford company came up with the Mustang and they had their total available market, they thought that only males would be interested in the Mustang. And so therefore their total available market calculation did not include women. Once they introduced the product, women were buying the Mustang at the same rate as men were. And so they figured out that their total available market was roughly twice as big as what they thought it would have been. So the name of the game is trying to decide, is there a market here and is there a big enough market here? So the total available market for what? Soap, let's say, right? Total available market for soap. What does that look like? If I were to summarize that in one picture, one way I could summarize it is take two features, deodorant soap and non-deodorant soap, and low moisturizing and high moisturizing. And these are the companies that fall into this category, and the size of the circle relates to how big a market share they have in the soap market. So this is a picture of the total available market for soap. And now as a great entrepreneur, what you're supposed to do is pick, these are at your discretion. So pick two axes which yields an empty area for you. So for example, it looks like in the marketplace there is not very many non-deodorant and low moisturizing soaps. I eat the high moisturizing soap that leaves a film on my body, so I would probably be in this area. I use deodorant already, so what do I need the deodorant soap for? So now the question is there a market here? It looks empty. Customers will tell you if there is one or there is not one, but a snapshot of the total available market and then what gaps are there in that marketplace that I can squeeze myself into. Other tools, this is like dual purpose again, leveraging. I'm trying to give you some tools that you can use. You have a product in mind for parents of children with autism. Is there a market there? I don't know. So I go and check how many times are people typing into Google. I'm getting St. Louis allergies, I think. Sorry. Okay. How many times people are typing into Google children with autism? Perhaps better one would have been toys for children with autism. Let's assume for a second that's what I should have done. I'll change it. When we type in toys for children with autism, this website tells us that 1,890 people are typing into Google toys for children with autism every month in the US. Globally, 3,600 people are typing into Google toys for children. This now gives me a sense of what the market size might be for toys with children in a way that I can quantify. at least one data point associated with it. Another website tells me the number of visitors to any given website per month. This is a young lady in Turkey that I met via email about 5-10 years ago, and what she did was, she was 15 years old maybe, and she had created a website that enabled kids to come in, and there's an avatar of a baby, I guess, or a little child, and you pick a red hat and a pink skirt and white t-shirt and so on, and you can put things on the baby. So she did this because she just loved playing with it. And when I asked her, or when I looked up how many people were visiting her website, 277,000 unique visitors per month to her website. And so our approach, unfortunately maybe, was like, oh, okay, we can monetize this, cost of customer acquisition, recurring revenue, subscription, and this money will fall out and so on. And she said, stop. I don't want to do anything to upset the children that are coming to my website to play with it, so go away. So we went away, obviously. But that was another way of getting an indication as to how big the market is. This is our success story in St. Louis, or one of them, Answers.com. So that lady's getting 277,000 hits per day. Answers.com getting 4.8 million hits per day on their website, and they're valued at about $1 billion. So you can do the math, right? So, but the question we're asking is there a market here? Tied to the question of what's the total available market. And then at the end of each of these terms, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of resources that if you have the time and the interest, go and learn more about what the total available market is. So, not rocket science. It just requires some level of interest to get you to come here for an hour and a half a week, and we start building up the Excel and start building up the plausible, defensible story. So, we have a few more minutes. The acid test is going to be if 3 people show up for the next workshop. I won't take it personally. I'll say they just weren't ready. So, questions, comments, feedback, guidance? Yes, ma'am.
How do we get on the mailing list for the slides? Do we just sign up outside? And
Signing up does the job. Yep. So you get all these slides by signing up, including the Excel that you can start playing with if you feel ready. Any other? You had a question? You had a question?
I was kind of that. If we're not able to make one of the meetings, that I assume will be sent.
Interesting question. Did we penalize you for not sending it? Yeah, I guess so. Maybe you should shoot us an email saying I can't make it to this one because I don't want to send the PowerPoint forever to everybody that came to the first one and never showed up again. At least some indication that you want the information would be good. Any other questions? So I'll have two things of my own to say. The first one is the Excel. One thing the Excel does not do, which none of you challenged me on, is how good is the entrepreneur? So if I get 2 of the same Excel, and one comes from a person who says, this is my first rodeo, and the other one says, oh, by the way, I started and sold 5 companies already, that gets incorporated into Excel via a cell that assigns by the investor a probability of failure. So I would reduce the probability of failure when an entrepreneur comes that has started 5 companies already. And that will have an impact on the valuation and everything else that the Excel will calculate. The second thing is the Excel is also useful for us in terms of checking out the jockey. If the person is getting defensive, argumentative, unreasonable, etc., while we're discussing the Excel with them, we're also judging the entrepreneur to make a decision, will this person be prudent with our money or not? The second thing that I want to say is this looks as if the Excel is strictly designed for scalable companies, large companies, 5 years and then an exit. It's also applicable to what we would call lifestyle companies. So if you want to open up a small coffee shop in one corner and have no thoughts about establishing a franchise, the Excel is still useful because it will ask you the tough questions that you need to answer. How many customers are going to come in? How much is the average ticket price? What's the cost? And so on and so forth. How many employees do you have to have? How much are you going to pay per employee? All the difficult questions that will be brought up. One last thing very quickly, the licensing play, pure licensing play. I'm an inventor, I invented something, I don't want to start a new startup, I just want to license it to a large company. Again, the same thing comes into play. Maybe the OEM will do this for you, but if you're the inventor and there's some ownership there, you should, in my opinion, you should spend the time to assess the commercial value of your invention so that you can level the playing field. When Glaxo comes to you and says, yeah, okay, we'll pay you $5 million for this. How did they come up with that $5 million? You know they went through a calculation of this type that determined the value of your invention. You should go through a similar calculation yourself and say, no, sir, this is going to increase the valuation of your company by X million dollars because you will capture, Y percentage share points off of this invention, and I want 15% of that value creation because it's my technology that's enabling you to increase the valuation of your company by that much. Yeah.
If we can encourage any others to attend the second lecture and thereon,
you get bonus points.
would you be kind enough to give a quick recap of this introductory lecture?
So the dilemma is that I don't want to bore the people who are here, so I'm going to suggest to ICTS. I think this workshop, because it tells people what is going to happen, is important enough that maybe we should hold it more than just once to give everybody an opportunity to hear. If you come, this is what you will find out. Perhaps we can do something along those lines. I'm more than happy to recover some of the information. Unfortunately, I find that if I don't do justice to the topic, if I don't spend an hour and a half to give the details, people are either overwhelmed and exit, too complicated, and can't even explain what he's talking about, and so on. I need the time to explain to people what it is that we're trying to do. Any other? Okay, thank you for coming, and hopefully see most of you next week. Take care. Thank you.